It's time for PaleoRadio, only on Secular Media Network.
You are now entering PaleoRadio.
Welcome to PaleoRadio with your hosts Jeremiah Bannister and Joe Elder.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is episode 20 of PaleoRadio. My name is Joe Elder.
I'm the Mac Attack, Jeremiah Bannister.
This is our second annual PaleoRadio Christmas Extravaganza.
Dude, time went by so fast, Joe. It was just a year ago that we were on Google Hangouts. And if people want to see that, they can go and watch our first annual PaleoRadio Christmas Extravaganza on our YouTube page.
It is quite a delight, isn't it?
It's amazing. Tons of fun.
It is tons of fun. We also have awesome segments lined up for you guys.
We have a whole bunch of amazing goodies, dude. We're starting off right out of the gate with poverty and substitute teachers. And it's a really, I don't even know what other word to use other than simply heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking.
Infuriating, maybe. They could just add that to it.
Yes, we can. We're going to follow that up with a public editor for the New York Times calls for systemic change and decries reliance on anonymous sources. That's going to be an interesting article that we're going to dive into.
We've been saying that for a long time, too. The evolution of teaching, creationism in public schools, that's going to be our third topic.
And then we're going to finish with the everlasting war on Christmas that is destroying America.
This was actually, it's so prominent, this war on Christmas. It's so real right now that it's actually hard to find anywhere.
It always has the good old-fashioned stuff that we're used to, nativity scenes. But a new one, we got Charlie Brown involved in this.
We do have Charlie Brown involved in this, and a whole bunch of parents that took it on themselves to do something really wild.
Yeah, bless them.
Yeah.
So we're going to start off with the first subject. High-poverty schools often staffed by rotating cast of substitutes. This is a Washington Post article by Emma Brown. Urban school districts hire 1 in 6 of their teachers after the school year begins, according to a Brown University professor study, whose research has shown a link between late hires and low student achievement. And the problem appears to be growing as teacher shortages intensify nationwide, leaving school systems struggling to fill vacancies. Jefferson County, Kentucky, had 107 vacancies in November, for example. More than 1.5% of the teaching corps in the state's largest district, which includes Louisville, and still has 50 remaining empty spots as of this week. Philadelphia still needs to hire 136 teachers, and Detroit still needs 135, more than 5% of its teaching positions. And the city has just 90 substitutes, so principals and other school staffers must cover the cost remaining for these classes, according to a Detroit school representative.
It blew my mind, Joe.
Man, it is mind-blowing.
Well, in Detroit, man, Detroit needing 135 teachers, more than 5% of its teaching positions are vacant right now.
And it's still a revolving door. That's what we have to remember, is the people that are in the position doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to stay there. So what does this mean? Going back to the article, it means thousands of children in those districts and many thousands more elsewhere have gone 3 months or more without a permanent teacher this school year.
This is, it's so infuriating. And here's the thing. I mean, I went to a small Christian school, and so we didn't have a lot of teachers. And we had a lot of, the principal might teach 3 classes. And you had a lot of teachers that kind of mixed and played around teaching other courses and other specialties. That was to our detriment.
Well, there's a gal named Kelly Gwaltney, who is a principal in North Carolina. She says she hired 56 teachers this summer out of a total of approximately 140 of her staff. 86% of her staff members have between 0 and 3 years experience. So not only is it a revolving door, but the people that are there are inexperienced people that are often looking to get their feet on solid ground, and they can't do that in a school where you have rules like No Child Left Behind implemented.
You can't. Well, and going back to the article again, struggling high-poverty schools are difficult to staff for many reasons, okay? So it's not just simply that, the people aren't trying really hard to find people to fill these spots. There's a lot of absenteeism. In fact, they were saying in urban schools, about a quarter of the time there's absenteeism.
Sure.
Whereas if you're more affluent, 1 in 12. Right? You see this exodus. What is it saying? At the end of the year, a lot of teachers in these very difficult schools that don't have a lot of the resources, very poor, the facilities are dilapidated, they leave.
Yes.
You know, it's for many people, they don't really want to leave school and going to become an educator and find themselves in a place where they don't have the resources necessary to do what they went to school in order to accomplish. And it's no offense to the children, most of the time, I assume. No offense to them, but they'd rather not stick around and try to keep this thing afloat or try to, hey, I'm going to commit myself to this endeavor of making this urban school much, much better. It's going to take years and years of all of our effort. And so they leave.
Yeah, and it's important to just imply or let everybody know what No Child Left Behind really does. What it does is it bases a standardized testing system on the entire school, and it bases the quality of the teacher on this testing system. So if you go into a lower economic school or a high poverty area and you're trying to work there and you're trying to build something very impressive there, when you begin and those low test scores hit you, you lose resources. Mm-hmm. You lose your funding after that. The funding goes down as your test scores go down, and they go up as they go up. The analogy I've always used is it's just like a rope if you're climbing on a mountain and everybody's hanging on to the same rope and No Child Left Behind's a pair of scissors right in the middle, and it literally just cut the line. Because if you hit the middle and up, you're doing well with your test scores, you're going to continue to get funding, you're going to go right through the roof. If you're in the lower, middle, and down, it depends on your test scores every single year if you're going to even get enough to get a new computer or hire a new staffer.
How can you have good test scores when you don't have consistent teachers?
Exactly.
I mean, it's kind of this vicious cycle, and one of the students that they interviewed talked about it, but it reminded me of the conundrum a lot of us have faced in our lives where you say, hey, I really need a job, but I need money to get a car so I can get to a job. You know, it's kind of that same quandary that they find themselves in where it's like, hey, we really need the money, but you need to get test scores up in order to get the money, but you need teachers in order to teach students in order to get good test scores to get the money. Yeah. And so it's this constant vicious cycle.
And we need something different. We need to have a way of allocating resources, allocating more resources to the areas that need it. We can't have this dictatorial process. Obviously, people with more resources have higher test scores. That's why we need to look at getting more resources into the lower areas or the higher poverty areas. If you get the money there, then you stand a chance of seeing these test scores improve. But doing it with this do-or-die cutthroat style is just ridiculous.
It kind of blew my mind, too, that in the piece where it says, inexperienced teachers are often the first to be laid off in tough budget times, which means layoffs can disproportionately affect high-poverty schools. There you go again. I mean, it's just adding to the problem and saying, in these high-poverty schools, you have a large number of inexperienced teachers, but in tough times, right, which is almost definitionally true of these urban schools, it's always a tough time. That when it gets difficult and they have to tighten the belt, they tighten it there.
Absolutely.
And I mean, how is that not adding insult to injury?
Well, and that is real life. I have my family has been involved in high school education. My immediate family. My mom was a high school counselor, and my sister right now is a teacher, and she experienced the same thing. If you're a new teacher, those first 2 or 3 years are imperative to your success there. You'll bounce around to 4 or 5 school districts before you even can find a home most times because of the scores that you get, especially if you go into a school district where you're trying to really help and you know that there's problems there. If you're trying to sink your feet into the ground and stay there, you have to have a great 2 or 3 years or you're going to get pink slipped, period.
Do you think that there should be some kind of a system set in place where if a teacher's willing to go into a school, into an area, a district that's, let's say it's an urban school, they've been really down in the dumps when it comes to funding, when it comes to the kind of stuff that goes on in the campus itself, the environment of the campus, as well as the testing, to say we're going to give you more money to do that so that it gives teachers an incentive not only to go but to stay?
Well, I think the bigger thing is investing in the actual structures of the schools and the buildings and making sure the resources are in the classrooms. Like, most teachers have to spend their own money just to get the resources in the class. They have to actually buy their own pencils. They buy the books for the classroom. Getting those resources there is just the beginning, but I think that's the most important thing. If you have a teacher that knows they don't have the resources and they know that they're fighting a losing battle, that's where you get the absenteeism, which bleeds into the students looking at it and saying, hey, look, my teacher won't even come in. I'm not going to come into class either. And you have this nasty cycle.
You think that it's okay the teachers earn the same salary regardless of their assignment?
No.
Yeah, that's what I was meaning to get at. Was in the piece it says, in most districts, teachers earn the same salary regardless of their school assignment. But some see high-poverty schools as more difficult because many students come to school already behind academically and facing serious challenges in their lives, many of which are beyond a teacher's control.
This is true.
Might be an incentive.
Yeah, they should. I believe you should pay teachers more to be in areas that need more work.
Incentivize not only to get them there, but to keep them there.
That's usually what we do anyway. Hey, if you're in a factory and you're working a line and that line needs more work, you pay overtime.
You know, my heart broke when I read a quote from this by Maya Alford. Maya says that she dreams of studying chemical engineering in college, but the high school junior is at a disadvantage. Last year, her chemistry teacher at Pittsburgh Westinghouse Academy quit just weeks after school started, and the class was taught by a substitute who, as Alfred put it, didn't know chemistry. You know, even speaking from my own experience, our kids go to a local school here. It's an urban school, and we've had a very difficult time having consistent teachers. There was a time where I think just last year they lacked a full-time music teacher, a full-time art teacher, a full-time science teacher, full-time history teacher. There was a whole bunch of these teachers that they simply didn't have anyone there. And you look at students who, and I said this to the principal, I said, listen, you know, my kids love art. My kids love music. They want to thrive in this. They want to pursue this and push as hard as they can and to learn and absorb as much as they can. But it's really difficult when you don't have the predictable classroom setting with a teacher who actually knows what he or she is talking about in that specific thing and can train a student to be the best they can at that.
That's why I'm very glad that people have identified what the problem is, and the problem is what drives those teachers out the door. It's not necessarily the workload, as it is the bad scoring that gives you a bad grade that makes you lose your job. I mean, it basically drives the people out of the door before they enter into it, and that's what I think the main problem is. You fix that problem, and we can have people who will stay and actually build a structure in those schools. Until then, we're going to see this revolving door go over and over and over.
You know, it shouldn't even have to be said, but right here, experts say the disruption of teachers coming and going and the frequent use of substitutes with varying levels of skill and commitment effectively steal learning time from students who can least afford it.
That's absolutely true.
That's totally true.
I wouldn't doubt it for a minute. Hey, next topic. We're going to be talking about the New York Times and an editor who calls for a systematic change and decries reliance on anonymous sources.
Happy days. We'll be right back right after this.
Love Paleo Radio? Join the club. Support our work by visiting patreon.com/Paleo Radio today.
Back to Eagle and Dragon.
Just as a reminder to all of the crazy fanatics that love this show and can't wait for the next episode to come out, they're freaking out, right? Getting shakes. You can speed up this entire process, right? Make it more efficient by downloading the Spreaker app. And if you download the Spreaker app and you subscribe and follow us on Spreaker, it will automatically download and it'll just be put right into your application. And you can listen to it on demand.
It can send you a notification that lets you know when we upload the newest content for you guys to check out. Pretty sweet.
It's literally that easy. So, okay, New York Times public editor calls for systemic change, decries reliance on anonymous sources. This is by, right, exactly. This is by Kara Bloomgarden-Smoke over at Observer.com. New York Times public editor Margaret Sullivan called for systemic change in a post on Friday after a front-page story about one of the San Bernardino shooters necessitated an editor's note. Quote, mistakes are bound to happen in the news business, but some are worse than others. What I'll lay out here was a bad one. It involved a failure of sufficient skepticism at every level of the reporting and editing process, especially since the story in question relied on anonymous government sources, as too many Times articles do.
Yes. Way too many Times articles do.
Way too many anybody's articles do.
Do you think it's just because of how fast and expedited we've had our media that it kind of calls for us to not be able to rely on anonymous sources, wherever they come from. That there's just way too many people that have access to being able to send tips that maybe it makes anonymous sources obsolete.
Well, well, that's a good point. And I wonder, too, I say, when you've got the media that's always pushing for the first group on the scene, or we're the first one to pump out this story, and we talked about this last week, but when you live in that cutthroat world of this, the idea of, well, we need to vet the source, that's time ticking.
Oh, yeah. You don't waste time with that.
Yeah, no way. You don't waste time vetting a source. You're like, well, I mean, pretty reliable on other anonymous tips this person's given me. I just assume he or she knows what they're talking about.
Guy I know told me. Good enough. Let's run with it.
Right, an authority.
Yeah.
Right? An anonymous authority who didn't want to say who they were for fear of repercussions.
Yeah.
It doesn't say why.
He's a guy I know. And in this particular case, these anonymous sources are government sources. Right, they're anonymous people that are supposedly higher ups in the government, and I'll just kind of burst everyone's bubble here, maybe, but propaganda is real, folks. It's kind of like a one-way ticket to someone being able to drop an anonymous source that just gets written in the New York Times for them. You just have a straight ticket to propaganda right on the New York Times for you
all the time,
all the time,
all the time. And here's the thing: how can the reader verify it? I mean, the reader's just left to the whim of whomever decided to make this decision, and many times, as we're finding out here, it happens to ill effect.
Yes. And
you look at it and say, boy, look at all of the problems this kind of thing causes. But I've been reading newspapers for years, and I remember when I first started reading them, it was during the election of George Bush and McCain. This is old school, kind of, and so reading it and saying, I thought it was really strange, even when I was younger, to read that and see an anonymous source said, and to see it over and over and over and over. You can't hardly open up a newspaper or magazine without seeing it splattered all over the place. It would seem like a large amount of their articles are based on these allegations, fundamentally, these allegations by individuals that, well, nobody can really verify one way or another how close they are to the scene, how intimately involved they are with whatever they're talking about, what kind of credentials they have to say anything at all on the topic. There's no way to do it. And I've always felt that this was a serious problem. And it's really great to finally see people in higher levels very openly decrying this.
It honestly changes the storylines, just like what we had here in San Bernardino.
Yeah, this story, quoting again, this story, co-bylined by Times investigative journalists Matt Apuzzo and Michael Schmidt, citing unnamed sources in law enforcement, alleged that Saudi-born shooter Tashfeen Malik had, quote, talked openly on social media about her views on violent jihad, meaning that immigration officials had missed a very visible and obvious warning sign, despite multiple background checks when Malik came to the United States from Pakistan.
Classy.
That's a big one.
Yeah, it is a big one.
It's a big oopsies.
It is a big oopsies.
And especially during a time when people are talking about the vetting process of refugees and questioning the vetters and saying, hey, why should we trust the vetters? And when you got the New York Times going out and saying, oh, the vetters missed this huge thing. It was so visibly obvious to everybody. Don't trust the vetters. Bad timing.
It is very bad timing.
It would seem.
The mistake Times executive editor Dean Baquette told Mrs. Sullivan was a result of relying on unnamed sources who did not properly understand the distinction between public posts and private messages on social media platforms. So what a reliable source. I'm not really sure on how this dadgum machine works. I think it was posted on a wall or it was tweeted on the Twitter machines.
I was saying even before this started, I said it reminded me of the individuals, and I've seen this so many times, dude, so many, on Facebook especially, where you have individuals who might be new to Facebook, okay, they don't really understand how it works, and somebody posts an image or a statement or they use profanity in their status update that you can only see in the news feed, but the newcomer to Facebook doesn't realize that the news feed is not their wall, that it's not their personal wall, so they interpret it as you just posted this to my wall. Right, and I'm like,
and they get all offended.
They get all sorts of tangled up, panties in a bunch. But you just sit there and say, this is really bad. And if you can't trust that your sources in law enforcement, I mean, that would seem to be an area, a realm of expertise, that you would know one of those kinds of things. Like,
you would hope.
Like, hey, a message or a text message or something done in private is not the same thing as tweeting it out or posting a status update for all your friends and the world to see.
If you are the credible anonymous source that you're supposed to be, I don't think you would have a problem with those distinctions. It really is just kind of a mind-boggling thing. And it's a reason why Sullivan went on to say that this is not a good idea and that we should discontinue doing it. And I totally agree. And I hope other institutions follow suit.
Well, it took FBI Director James Comey coming out to say, hey, Malik didn't, in fact, openly call for jihad.
No,
right?
Jeez.
It's one of those things. You might want to kind of tuck that little factoid into your article. You know what? It doesn't normally suffice, and I wish I knew more exactly how they dealt with it. If it was a front page correction, it was mentioned in the piece. But a lot of times, corrections of this nature are done. They're tucked away in this small little portion of the newspaper. You almost have to struggle to find it.
Oh, yeah.
Where they made a mistake and they say, oopsies, we're sorry about that. Corrections, right? We're making some kind of a correction to yesterday's record or some record from before. And it's tucked away, and it's like this kind of stuff, this is big.
Yeah, it's kind of like digging for gold. It is important to note that Sullivan is going to be leaving next August in 2016 when her 4-year contract is up. So it may be true that she's just kind of being wide open and saying this is the way it needs to be, this is the correct thing. And when you know that you're going to be going out, you tend to get a little bit more honest.
Well, I'll tell you, I was wondering the same thing, and I looked it up. And Margaret Sullivan, she'd written about this, what was it, 4 years, back in 2010 maybe, 2012?
Wow, so before she was
so
even part of it.
before she was talking about it, even since when she began as a public editor, talking about her frustration with anonymous sourcing. You know, so, but she says this, right? Beckett did not call for bans, by the way. He didn't say, hey, we need to ban anonymous sources. But Sullivan had this to say, quote, "The Times needs to fix its overuse of unnamed government sources, and it needs to slow down the reporting and editing process, especially in the fever-pitch atmosphere surrounding a major news event. These are procedural changes, and they're needed. But most of all, and more fundamental, the paper needs to show far more skepticism, a kind of prosecutorial scrutiny at every level of the process." And, you know, I'll tell you, that's inspiring.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice for everybody?
For everybody.
It's like a creed that everyone could adopt.
And you almost wish, I especially wish in times like this, that you didn't have that right-left divide over the Times. That people could say, well, the Times are good on some stuff and bad on others, and they could simply give praise where it's due, right? Rather than just saying, well, criticism all the time. Because this would definitely warrant a lot of praise.
Yes.
No matter really where you're from, if your goal and your ambition as a reporter or as a commentator or as a journalist, whatever you're doing, if your idea is to accurately get information out there, and you're not just doing the Trump thing of just kind of letting the diarrhea of the mouth flow, and if stuff sticks, that's so be it, right? But if you're really out there and you're trying to say something that's true and something you stand by and something that's for the record, especially when you are the record, when you are, for all practical intents and purposes, the record for people and for history's sake, this should just be tickling your ears. You should literally love this. You should be jumping for joy.
I wonder how many people actually know that there's a lot of news sources that are delivered through anonymous sources, especially government anonymous sources. I wonder how many people know that is actually a prevalent thing in our news, and how many know that there's actually kind of a ghostwriter to some of these articles in a way. Someone who's tipping you off in the way that they want you to be tipped off, where you're writing what they want you to write. And I mean, I know that's a little bit grab your tinfoil hat-ish, but it's absolutely true. The age of propaganda is the strongest it's ever been today.
Well, and power players didn't stop using propaganda.
Oh, no. They just adapted
like,
mediums.
Well, yeah, we've just given up on that old thing. You know?
Instead of just a drawing of a pregnant woman in the bottom of the sea with the Lusitania, now they have videos to show you on YouTube for it. It's pretty much the only crossover you've gotten.
I just can't get over this. Needs to slow down the reporting and editing process, especially in the fever-pitch atmosphere surrounding major news events.
We need to make it into a song.
That needs to be a platinum, a platinum record.
We need someone
pump
to
out
sing it.
platinums. Yeah, you're a platinum pumper outer.
Hey, thanks.
Yeah.
We'll get Nora Roberts to sing it. No.
But I look at it and I say that's exactly what we've been saying, that when talking about news, especially major news, especially news that's really controversial, and you're surrounded, fever pitch is a perfect way of saying a fever pitch atmosphere, which I think that's exactly where we are right now in our culture, in our political economy, that we need to slow down.
Big time.
We need to just say, listen, as the facts come in, we will report those things. Just do it.
If anybody in any of our major news sources said that right off the bat, I'd begin watching them immediately. If it was CNN, MSNBC, Fox News even, if you got the report that said we're going to give you the info as we receive it, we want to verify some things before we give you the information, I would begin to follow them all the time. It's true.
I mentioned earlier, I said that, wondering how often this happened or what was said about it. Right here, 2 front-page anonymously sourced stories in a few months have required editor's notes that corrected key elements that were integral enough to form the basis of the headlines in both cases. That's not acceptable for Times readers or for the paper's credibility, which is its most precious asset.
Absolutely. It's as good as gold.
You need to just go and read it, everybody. It's worth your time. Just go and read it. New York Times public editor calls for systemic change, decries reliance on anonymous sources.
Next topic is going to be evolution, teaching creationism in public schools. It's going to be a good one.
If you leave, you can't come back in. Paleo Radio will return.
Now back to Joe and Jeremiah.
The evolution of teaching creationism in public schools. This is an article out of The Atlantic by Eric Jaffe. A new study shows that anti-evolution lessons have become more stealthy and integrated into the curricula. This is a very interesting article.
Yeah, and it's over by City Lab's New York Bureau Chief, Eric Jaffe. He writes about transportation, behavior, and history. He's got a general interest in the science of city life. And actually, I've seen his work before, but this was an excellent piece. He's a great writer.
Yeah, this is a really good article. It's focused around Nick Matzke, who is a researcher at the Australian National University. Matzke performed a close textual analysis of 67 anti-evolution education bills proposed by local government since 2004. 3 U.S. states have signed into law during this time: Mississippi, Louisiana, and Tennessee. Big surprise there.
Yeah, right.
The result was a phylogenetic tree, in effect a developmental history, tracing these policies with 2 main legislative roots, so-called Academic Freedom Acts and Science Education Acts.
I thought this was a brilliant idea, by the way, John.
It's an amazing tree. It is. It's an evolutionary tree of the creationist bills trying to leak their way into the science classroom.
And to say, out of all of these, if you can find the 67 and if you can lay them out, how similar are they? What are the dissimilarities? Are any words missing that used to be there before? Does it almost feel like copy and paste? What a great idea.
Yeah, and it turns out that there is quite a bit there. Quote, "It's not one thing to say that 2 bills have the same resemblances, and another thing to say that Bill X was copied from Bill Y with greater than 90% probability." This is what Nick Matzke had said. So basically he's saying that there's a massive difference between saying, oh, they're similar, to saying, oh, these are absolutely almost related.
If once you're into that realm and you've got that level of predictability, then you're like, okay, there's kind of something going on here. Yeah, exactly.
So to give an idea of how creationism has tried to kind of leak its way into the science classroom, they do give examples of what different states have tried to introduce. And a lot of it is through the way of just opening up controversy. And it's kind of just trying to leave an open door and hoping that somebody that they are looking for will fill it. So an example would be in South Dakota. In South Dakota, State SB 114 gives teachers full freedom to help students understand, analyze, critique, or review in an objective manner the scientific strengths and scientific weaknesses of existing scientific theories, with biological evolution mentioned as one such theory alongside global warming.
Yes.
So it makes sense that you want to show the scientific strengths and weaknesses, but what they want to do is open a door so you have someone with a biased opinion who can manipulate the law.
What counts as objective?
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, seriously, Deepak Chopra. I mean, are we going to bring in some good old Deepak into the conversation and say, well, one criticism he's got of X, Y, and Z is this right here, and that's objective because he's a popular figure. What would be the criterion for an educator, right? Not just for the students, but for an educator to say, hey, when you're debating these things and you're trying to do it objectively, some sources just simply aren't as good as others, right? Not all sources are the same.
No, and some are crap.
Yeah, some are just complete garbage.
And some have no place in the conversation whatsoever.
Zero. And take Missouri. Missouri has this to say, quote, to assist teachers to find more effective ways to present the science curriculum where it addressed scientific controversies. And once again, these scientific controversies, again, are listed much the same. It always has to do with biological evolution, with random mutations, or natural selection, anything like this.
The other one this is really right out in the open here, Oklahoma bill, creating a Science Education Act that urges teachers to help students develop, again, here we go, critical thinking skills about unidentified controversial issues with the understanding that is not to be construed to promote any religious or non-religious doctrine. Now that sounds pretty good. Okay, it's saying we can't promote one religious doctrine or not. This is about the science. But much in line with the aforementioned legislative efforts, this is in Alabama, the sponsor of this bill, Representative Mac Butler, betrayed its intentions when he noted on Facebook that its aim was to, quote, encourage debate if a student has a problem learning he came from a monkey rather than from intelligent design, unquote.
There you go.
So he kind of blew that one all open, didn't he?
Yeah, it's kind of like the guy from the Benghazi committee talking about Hillary.
Yeah, and by the way, he's got everything all wrong, Mac. We didn't come from monkeys. We are apes, and we're related. So, no, it's a little bit different. And we still are apes, so it's not like we're different.
If some kids get really ticked off and don't understand that we came from monkeys when, in fact, we didn't in the first place.
Yeah, so a little off.
One of those things.
There.
You got Montana. You know, they don't beat around the bush at all. Here you go, quote, truth in education about claims over scientific discoveries, including but not limited to biological evolution, the chemical origins of life, random mutation, natural selection, DNA, and fossil discoveries can cause controversy.
Now, isn't this kind of the same position that marketing strategists have always used for things like cigarette smoking, global warming, pesticides, things like that? I mean, honestly, when you look at like cigarette smoking, they used to say, oh, we just introduced a controversy. As long as people say that there's a debate open, we win the neutral ground. Right?
What qualifies for this anyway, as a debate, as a controversy?
Oh, man. I'm not sure. I'd love to see.
Yeah, I'd love to see.
To see what the controversial evidence is for evolution. And if someone has, I love Richard Dawkins saying, if you believe that this isn't true, go out there, collect the evidence, put it together, write a paper, and get your Nobel Prize, because you're going to change science forever.
What is it going to say other than, hey, there's this religious guy or gal over here who they don't like the ramifications of Darwinian evolution. They don't like the way that it's being taught in schools. And so they're trying to push this thing that they've been trying to push for a long time, and that qualifies as a controversy. But it's not really a controversy within the science itself.
No, but what is a controversy is how often it's getting into actual schools and affecting people's classrooms. This is going back to the article. None of these bills passed in 2015, but that isn't the point, says Matsky. After all, several states have adopted such policies into law in recent years, placing millions of public school children in the hands of educators who might promote creationist alternatives to evolution, either because they have religious motivations themselves or simply weak scientific backgrounds, which is what I'm concerned with, is having science teachers who don't really have strong scientific backgrounds.
And that's the marketing thing you're talking about. It's kind of banking on the fact that so many of these students really don't even understand what it means to say something is a scientific controversy over against something that might be a religious controversy or something that might be over a cultural or political controversy over against something that's a strictly scientific controversy.
Yes.
And there are scientific disagreements over things.
Yes, and what you really need is someone with a strong scientific background to sit in the classroom, and when someone says, well, I think that I can refute biological evolution with the evidence for God, then someone can say, well, we need to put this in the framework of a science classroom. And Neil deGrasse Tyson nails it when he talks about science. He always says, I'm not trying to say that you can't talk about the religious belief because it's religion. I don't want it in the science classroom because it's not science. The same way that he says, I don't come to your door on Sunday and knock it down saying that I want to prove what's wrong and what's going on there. The science classroom is for science and scientific theory. That is what you're there to learn. You're not there to try to manipulate the system. It's almost as if someone's going in there and looking at answers to algorithms and math and saying, nope, these are wrong. These are wrong because I was taught algorithms when I was a little kid, and these are absolutely wrong. I know about them more than you do, math teacher.
And look at some of the things that they're saying are controversial, and I don't mean to keep harping on this, but I mean really. Montana, going back to that, fossil discoveries.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
Yeah, well, because let's still leave it open that the devil put them there to test our faith.
Hey, I've seen Facebook groups that I thought were a joke, right? Like, I don't know if there was one, was it Christians Against Dinosaurs or something like that? And I thought it was a joke, and I went, and no, these people are straight for real, and they go into museums like the Smithsonian and other places, and they'll stand in front of bones, and they will talk about how this whole thing is a satanic guise to get you duped into evolution and into thinking that you're not magically made.
The ideas of man.
Cosmic act of creation.
Yeah, it's true.
But that's considered, apparently, according to the people in Montana, that can cause controversy.
Yes, fossil records.
Fossil records. They're saying the controversy, look, there's some legitimacy in that Facebook page.
And you're supposed to tell me that all those dinosaurs turned into birds? Like chickens, those things we eat?
Just all of a sudden,
way.
out of nowhere, just popped out some wings.
That can't happen in 6,000 years, Jeremiah. None of this makes sense.
And this is a long time, man, after the Scopes trial.
No,
I mean,
this is very
over,
long.
What, 90 years?
Yes.
Since the Scopes trial? And it's been over a decade since the whole Dover trial. You know, that was a big deal. But you look at it and you say, it seems like activists, and that's what they are. You're talking about people who are activists. You're not talking about a robust scientific community of people who disagree with evolution.
No.
A lot of activists and apologists out there doing it. I mean, when William Lane Craig shows up everywhere, and he's the mouthpiece for it, you're kind of like, yeah, you know, like we got Mr. Apologist guy over here, and we got science people over on this side. Way on the scales.
Do you have any arguments for evolution that you like to use with people to help them wrap their mind around it? Is there anything that you try to throw their way?
Anything that I try to throw their way? The idea that small incremental changes can happen over long periods of time. I mean, I don't think that that's a difficult thing.
I don't think so.
In and of
either.
itself to wrap your head around.
I think one that's real quick. It's a Dawkins one, real easy. But name the day that you got old. Pretty hard to do, but you do look in the mirror one day and go, oh, man, I've gotten old. But you can't really necessarily name the exact day you turned old. That's exactly how an intermittent species and the transfer of genes works.
It's kind of like what you're saying is kind of reminds me of the graphic where you got a whole bunch of skeletal fossils and stuff going back with apes a long way in our timeline and saying, where's the first man?
Yeah. Yeah.
Saying, look at all of these pictures and tell me which one's the first one.
The other one I like to use, I think this is the best one, is when people say, "Oh, you want to say we came from algae." Well, that's kind of where you want to start the story. You can start it with the chemicals that were condensed in stars when they explode to create carbon and nitrogen and things that make your body. But there's better arguments for it. The best one is saying we were microscopic things when we began, and now we're all huge human beings. So if that can happen in a 30-year span, is it hard to believe that humans can become something out of algae in 100 million?
Interestingly enough, it seems like the creationists and intelligent designers are evolving, and that reality is an arms race after all.
Yes, it is. What's not evolving? The war on Christmas. Grab your guns. It's time to go.
For debates, interviews, or speeches, contact PaleoRadio at gmail.com.
You love to hate 'em, you hate to love 'em. You just can't get enough of 'em, you sick freaks. Paleo Radio's on the air.
I can think of no better song, Joe, than this to lead into the grand finale of the second annual Paleo Radio Christmas Extravaganza.
That's right. It's an extravaganza, and put on your helmets because we're going to war.
We're going to war. There's 3 stories. You know, we kind of debated a couple different topics. We weren't sure what we wanted to talk about. We're like, it's our Christmas Extravaganza. We want to make a big to-do of this. And we stumbled and said, well, why not talk about the war on Christmas? It's got to be everywhere.
Yeah, but it seems like it's only at the Blaze lately.
right. Even at Bill O'Reilly's site, it's just not what it used to be.
Pumping the brakes.
I think old Bill said it's over. I think he just said the war on Christmas is just done.
They've been defeated.
I don't know. But if you go over to the Blaze, Billy Hallowell and company over there, they're hardcore about it. They've got an entire section of their website dedicated to it, to nativity controversies, to school plays, to Christmas in general. There was all different stories to choose from, and we picked 3 different topics here.
We've got 3 good ones, one involving Charlie Brown, one's involving a nativity scene at a high school, and the other one is about the atheist billboards that have been popping up.
And they're all tons of fun. So this first one, Kentucky school cuts Bible passages from a Charlie Brown Christmas, so parents decide to take Glenn Beck's advice. This is by Trey Goins-Phillips.
On the Blaze.
On the Blaze.
Ironic.
Yeah. So it says right here, when one Kentucky elementary school cut Linus Van Pelt's famous monologue from a Charlie Brown Christmas, in which he shares the meaning of the holiday season by reading Luke 2, 8 through 14, the administration probably wasn't expecting the kind of response they received during Thursday's Christmas production.
Oh, they got a big response, didn't they?
They did. Well, it caught the attention of Glenn Beck, and Glenn Beck suggested to the parents on his show that when that part comes up in the play, that they just simply read it. He said, I would get together with parents, and I would, if I knew this was coming, take the script of what Linus actually says, and I would stand up as a block of parents and just stop the show, and just all of us at that point. Doesn't anybody know what Christmas is all about? And all the parents stand up and just start saying it, even as the play is going on.
Good thinking, Glenn.
That's direct action, Glenn Beck.
And as it turns out, that's exactly what happened.
It's exactly what happened. They got up and they just started reciting the whole thing. And listen, we're going to go ahead and read exactly what was said to let you know, and may let you decide on whether or not you think this was appropriate and fitting to be in schools. It's Luke chapter 2, 8 through 14. And there were in the same country shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. And lo, the angel of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord shone round about them, and they were sore afraid. And the angel said unto them, Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For unto you is born this day in this city of David a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. And this shall be a sign unto you. Ye shall find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of heavenly hosts, praising God and saying, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men.
Yeah, and there were people that were in the crowd that really dug that. Joey Collins, who was a parent of one of the Kentucky students, had said, the parents in the bleachers basically quoted the verse from the book of Luke, and it was just an amazing moment. It really was. Everybody was pretty much in tears and clapping. It was just a great time.
Was he talking about a Christian school that did a play or a public school?
No, he's talking about public school.
That's a neat thing, and that's where it really gets under my craw, okay, is you sit there and you say, well, it's one thing to do this at a Christian school. I went to one, right? Yep. My parents sacrificed time and money in order to make sure that I could get the education that they felt was best appropriate for me, and allowed us to do stuff like this. It's kind of definitionally part of what a Christian school does. But the idea that, well, you know what, we don't want to send our kids to a school that legally that's what it's for, okay, and it's designed to foster that kind of an environment that allows it. We want this here for everybody, regardless of what their beliefs may happen to be.
Yeah, and I would say this. I don't think people should go cutting through the Charlie Brown thing. I really don't. I do personally, and send your hate mail directly to me, I do think Charlie Brown kind of sucks anyway, and I don't know why we're continuing on this tradition of, it's kind of lazy drawing. Sorry, Schultz, but it's true.
Yeah, send all your hate mail to PaleoRadioShow@gmail.com. Attention, Joe.
Joe Elder. ELDER is how you spell my last name, folks.
Yeah, so, I understand people wanting to have that. I do, and I also understand the what you said about, well, I really don't care if something's in there like that, but at the same time, if you're going to do that play in a public school, right, then you really have to kind of take that whole law thing into consideration.
Well, and that's why you shouldn't do that play at school, because Charles Schultz, the guy that wrote it, like I said, I'm not the hugest fan, but I do agree with this. He says, quote, humor, which does not say anything is worthless humor. So I contend that the cartoonist must be given the chance to do his own preaching. Which I agree with that. So my answer to the whole thing would say, let's find a whole different play than Charlie Brown.
Well, yeah, a cartoonist can do their preaching, but the idea that you can translate that and say, a public school should be able to do its own preaching every once in a while.
And that's what removes it from being an entity that you can bring to the public school. All
right, second topic. Happy holidays. Atheists unveil Santa-themed Christmas billboard. And here's why some say it's offensive.
Now the war rages.
This is Billy Hallowell. He says this, it's that time of year again. Atheist activists have unveiled a Santa-themed billboard that encourages people to skip church, hoping to drive home the notion that there's no relation between church attendance and being a moral person. The billboards from American Atheists, a group based in Cranford, New Jersey, included an image of Santa and read, "Go ahead and skip church. Just be good for goodness sake. Happy holidays." I thought this was hilarious. There's a Colorado resident, Alexis Esselman, told WSPA-TV, quote, "I think it's a little offensive. When I first saw it, I thought, what did they mean by that?"
Yeah, well, pretty much saying you don't have to go to church. Do you feel that it's more offensive than just getting bombarded with Christian religious billboards all over the place telling you Merry Christmas and to have a happy holiday if you don't celebrate it? Is it more offensive than that?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
No.
I really don't. I mean, and plus, what's the number of atheist billboards going up in comparison to religious ones that are going up at this time of year? I mean, it's minuscule.
Minuscule. You know, and there's only a couple places where this is actually done. But, you know, I got to say this, though. There was the billboard last year that had a message from this group. It was a girl writing a faux letter to Santa, and it read, "Dear Santa, all I want for Christmas is to skip church. I'm too old for fairy tales." I think that's a different thing. A little bit.
No, it is. It's openly offensive for someone to say, "Oh, this is the 25th, it's the winter solstice." But no, it's not. It's the day of birth for my God, and you need to talk about my God right now, and it's my God's day and my God's birthday and my God's everything, and everyone gets to talk about my God for 2 months. Right now, we're going to talk about it.
Yeah.
That is going to get a response from people that say, "I think what you're talking about is BS." And I think that just the nature of the holidays, with how religiously fervent it is, I think it merits a response like that sometimes. I really do.
You know, and I have to agree with David Silverman, and I don't always agree with him. But he said this, "We want people to know that going to church has absolutely nothing to do with being a good person. The things that are most important during the holiday season, spending time with loved ones, charity, and being merry, have nothing to do with religion." And I thought that was a worthwhile statement to make.
That is. And like Hallowell said, where atheists are trying to drive home the notion that there's no connection between church attendance and being a moral person. That's not just an atheist tendency. That's a tendency of most Christians who don't attend church very often. They argue the same notion all the time.
That they're good people even though they're creasters.
They don't need
Christmas and Easter Christians.
Yeah, creasters.
Sure.
Oh, I like that. That's classy.
Yeah, it's a good one. So the third one here, running out of time, atheists demanded that public school axe live nativity scene from its Christmas show. Here's how a federal judge just responded. According to the USA Today, a federal judge has banned a public high school from including a live nativity in this year's Christmas show, granting a preliminary injunction against the scene and agreeing with secular activist groups that it conveys a message of endorsement of religion. Now, it grants a victory, once again, the article says, to the American Civil Liberties Union and the Freedom from Religion Foundation against the Concord Community Schools, an Indiana school district that has defended the Christmas play. He concluded that both activist groups are correct in their claim about proselytizing and endorsement of religion. And by the way, this live nativity scene has been going on for over 30 years.
And it has been. It says at the center of the debate is the fact that the annual Christmas Spectacular features Bible characters as well as readings from Scripture about the birth of Jesus, something that opposing individuals and groups are calling unconstitutional. Some are calling it unconstitutional. Yeah. It's not like, that
settled.
It is.
It's not. Yeah, just that it is. Right, that it's kind of been settled that way.
I've always liked the argument, like you said, when someone harkens back and says, well, this has been going on for 30 years. Since when does duration dictate if something is correct or not? Oh, we've been doing it wrong for 30 years, so we can continue to do it wrong for 30 more years, right? I mean, that just, to me, it doesn't hold a lot of weight.
According to the complaint, their presence at the Christmas Spectacular is coercive. represents an endorsement of religion by the high school and the school corporation, has no secular purpose, and has the principal purpose and effect of advancing religion. I don't know how that can be denied.
Yeah, it absolutely does.
I don't know. I mean, I'm being honest. And people can say, well, it's maybe not just coercive. They think of coercive in ways like physical brute force or something. But talking about an endorsement of religion by the high school, totally. Talking about having no secular purpose, totally. The principal purpose and effect of advancing religion, totally. I mean, it's not even questionable.
If not, you're talking about going to court to argue that things like the nativity scene and biblical characters are not connected to a religion. I mean, that's really the argument that you'd be trying to walk into if you were a lawyer taking up this case. No, the nativity scene doesn't represent Christianity.
Right. Yeah, those characters, that's not really from the Bible.
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck. I mean, when you're talking about angels, these invisible creatures that, otherworldly, that pop in and out of reality every now and again to tell, illiterate people about reality for them. And I feel badly saying that, but I mean, it kind of is the case, and so, yeah, I agree with, what's her name, Anna Laurie Gaylor, yeah, that a live nativity is a shocking violation to encounter in a public school.
Absolutely. She also says it has no business directing students to engage in devotional, sectarian performances, which I completely agree with. And you know what? There is a bit of a war on Christmas because Christmas is blown up. It's been put on a pedestal, and honestly, it needs to take a step back and get on equal ground with the rest of us.
Yeah, talking about something that needs to take a step back, we're out of time, Joe.
Yes, we are. Man, it goes by.
This is flying.
It always flies. Thank you guys for listening to us once again.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody listening to WPRR, WPJC, listening to us on iTunes, Spreaker, following us on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube.
That's right. And don't forget, you can donate to us at patreon.com/PaleoRadio. Thank you guys very much. We will see you next week.
You've been listening to Paleo Radio, exclusively with Secular Media Group.